Good morning, everybody. John Sfiocla here for GAI Insights, doing our Gen AI news briefing, rating your top news essential, important, or optional. We have Luda, Adam, and Tim this morning. We might be joined by Paul later. Lots of interesting news, everything from Cerebras's new trillion token training effort on a single chip through some interesting stuff around a review of 2024 and what we've seen in the Gen AI world. So let's go ahead and get started here. First, we have this trillion parameter model that was trained on a single CS3 mega chip that Cerebras has been working on. And the folks who have been doing this are Sandia National Labs and others in the intelligence community and the weapons community, in terms of really pushing forward this new chip architecture, which is just a massive wafer. And what did you think about this one, Luna?
Yeah, I thought that this was pretty impressive. So I rated it important because I think our leaders need to know about it. There are two news. One is that this $1 trillion model was trained on one chip. And then the second...
Yeah, just one correction, not $1 trillion, trillion parameter.
Trillion parameter.
You said $1 trillion.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry, trillion parameter model. This is at par with whatever models are out there. So it was trained on one CS3 system, right, with the memory that has enough of the memory to train one model, right? And then the second piece of news that then they transitioned the code to 3 systems and then to 16 systems, and observed that it scaled pretty much linearly. And that's a very good piece of news. So with a speed of 15.3x on the 16 combination of 16 chips, right? So this is tremendous potential in training new models. So I think it's important to know.
All right, we're going to vote for important here. Tim, Adam, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I think AI leaders have to at least be aware of the hardware side of things, because it's an enormous part of the cost, and both energy and data center costs, direct data center costs. So I think it's important to be aware of things that are potentially game-changing, and this one's potentially game-changing. We've talked about Cerebras on and off for a while, and this was quite impressive, especially the linear scaling part.
Where are you on this, Adam?
I was optional, and I think I'm important now as I'm listening, particularly as Luda opened it up. It is significant, and it is. I mean, one of these things can outperform the B200s quite significantly, and when we talk about that kind of cost and that accessibility, and what I think is to be seen is to what degree they can scale this and bring it to market. I understand it's available now, so this isn't just like research or announcing that they've achieved a capability. Mm-hmm. This is something that's in market, and I think for that reason it is important that people be aware, not even specifically about this, but how much that cost to train is going to continue to go down, probably faster than we can even imagine, and people should be preparing for that.
Yeah, and it's not, see, if Cerebras was announcing that they did it, it's Sandia National Lab did it, right? So they had a team that trained it. So it's an independent use of the chips or the system. So I think, important.
Yeah, interesting. I was going to give it an important also. I should say the national labs a lot of times at the very edge of compute power. I just think when you think about the where the money has gone, in terms of going toward NVIDIA, that really is about an emphasis, a different part of the computer architecture. So I wouldn't be surprised if this, as we hit limits of certain kinds of computation, that this gets more and more valuable. Important it is. Next.
John, are you announcing it, or do you want me to? So the
next I got one, it.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just muted here to save you from my pugs. So we have Simon Williamson's blog. I think it's a pretty interesting review of different things that he thinks about, and also some pointers to what he's done over the year. Everything from ChatGPT and the ChatGPT 4 barrier, all the way through. Well, I thought my favorite part of it was the year of slop, which is he's making the case for unwanted AI content to be called slop. It's like spam is the label for unwanted email. So let's see. On this one, I think we had me. So the case I was going to make for this was important. I think it's well articulated. It's a little stronger on the front end than the back end. What I mean by the earlier stuff, this notion of the ChatGPT barrier being comprehensively broken. That's the idea that more and more models are out there. In the original GPT, I think, is 70th on the leaderboard. There's some good pointers in here as well. The notion of prices crashing. Another interesting thing in here is I like his analogy. He said, a lot of these models are being portrayed as if they were a kitchen knife. They actually are more like a chainsaw, in the sense that individuals have to be a little careful, but you really need to be taught how to use them. And so I thought that was really good. Of all the things in here, I think this notion of the year of slop, if slop gets taken up as a way to talk about AI-driven content and interactions that are unwanted, I think that'll be perhaps its biggest contribution. And then this notion of knowledge is incredibly unevenly distributed. I think that's true in general, especially knowledge about what's going on in this marketplace. He notes, how few people understand where Claude Sonnet is, for example, and how the people who are into this are actually seeing all kinds of new capability. And last but not least, the thing I liked was when he went into this notion that that LLMs deserve criticism, but we shouldn't throw the baby out. He didn't use that term, but we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That there are a lot of capabilities, and there are some people like Gary Marcus and David Reed who just throw out the notion that there's that these things have any value because they don't they can hallucinate, and a lot of people don't understand how to use them and so forth. But he makes the case for these are actually incredibly powerful and getting adopted. So I was going to give it an important, both for the content and for the pointers.
I beg to differ with an optional. I think it's old news. It's
somewhat. No, you're going to go for optional. You mean
optional?
Yes. Okay.
Yes, it's sort of backward looking, but some good thoughts. But I don't know whether this is worth sending AI leader to read through this. But yeah, that was my perspective.
In defense, it is a review of 24, so it's got to be backward looking. But anyway,
I would give this an important. Again, important in our lingo means you don't have to read it, but you should if you have time. And I think, to his point, which I think is a really good one that we all forget. Most people don't even know what Claude is. Right? If you say Claude to people, most people, if you say ChatGPT, they at least have some vague notion of what it is. But if you say Claude, if you say Quen, forget about it, okay? And so we forget how far away from, and I'm talking about, even AI leaders, most AI leaders will know who Claude is, or which of course I'm anthropomorphizing what Claude is. But it's amazing how much or how little, I guess, people know. So for that reason, I think articles like this, it's a little deeper than we probably need. But as you said, John, it gets a little off track here and there. But it makes some really good points. The one that I will bring up that you didn't mention is about evaluation. I've been saying this since day one. The most difficult thing about these models and using them in practice is how do you evaluate whether they're actually doing what you want them to do? This is like, performance reviews in organizations are still the bane of organizations' existence because it's very hard to evaluate how humans do as well. So this is a real problem. And I did like his analogy. I always use this analogy. I called it he called it the circular saw or whatever. I call it the chainsaw. But you know, in early stages, technology is useful to master craftsmen. And the danger is if you're not a master craftsman and you put one of these tools in somebody's hand, you know, it's whatever your favorite metaphor is, guns in the hands of children, chainsaws in the hands of the untrained. You know, a lot of bad things can happen. But in the hands of the master craftsman, it's amazing what you can do. So I agree completely with that. So and the slop thing was good too. So some good points here. I think, you know, we have to remember that most people are very, very naive about most of the market. So I think it's a useful read for most people.
Yeah, I think Kevin knows something interesting too. This notion of, you know, kind of in defense of synthetic data, which is interesting debate going on right now, and Kevin's experience being different here. Yeah, Adam, I'm headed for important here.
Yeah, I'll support important. I was actually going to comment. One of the things I wanted to call out in the article was exactly what Kevin's talking about here, because that was sort of a bit counterintuitive for me. The idea about the synthetic data working great, but they make a good point, right? DeepSeek v3 used reasoning data that was created synthetically with DeepSeek Reasoning 1, and Meta's Llama 3 70 billion fine-tune used over 25 million synthetically generated examples. Right, and that the days of just scraping the internet and dumping all the information to a model are long over. That we've come to understand that by creating data sets, we can actually be much more efficient in the training.
Well, I think we know. Again, we're recapitulating human intelligence on silicon substrate is what we're doing right now, and we know, you know, the way we educate humans makes an enormous amount of difference. And so it's not surprising that the way we educate, which is training these models, makes an enormous amount of difference. Whether synthetic data will prove to be good or bad, I don't know. You know, I grew up in databases. We use synthetic data all of the time. Worked great. So unclear, because the data is so much more semantically important, or well, I guess rich. Unclear, but I think I wouldn't count it out yet.
Very good.
Long and short being, John, yeah, I support important. I think there's you know, there's a lot of information in a relatively well formatted presentation.
Okay. Important.
One other thing too that really got my attention too, which is the data center build out going to be a bubble? Because the point he made about things are getting so much better on the environmental and power front, and the article we just saw about Cerebras and the DeepSeek training, if it's true, interesting. We'll see, you know, if all this extra data center power is really needed.
Yep.
Yes, very interesting. All right, we have to pick up the pace a little bit here, but we're going important in this one. Next. We have MEDIC, a benchmark for medical error detection and correction in clinical notes. So on this very interesting new benchmark here, trying to make sure that, as I understand it, make sure that the data that are being used to compare and contrast or to validate these medical models is in fact correct, to make sure there's not embedded problems in that. Let me know if I get that right, Tim. This one's up for you.
Yeah, it's close enough. Yep, close enough for Govy work. And it's interesting. I think I would call this optional unless you're really into the medical field, and in particular using LLMs in the medical field, then this is essential. But that's a pretty small niche. So I think for most people, this is optional. We were just talking about evaluation, so I'm happy to see things like this, which are focused on evaluation of complex tasks. There are a few more complex than what's called differential diagnosis. That is the ultimate diagnosis of a medical condition and the treatment and therapies involved there. And we know, and this article points out, how many errors there are. It's a miracle, in fact, at one level that there aren't more problems created by these errors. And it's a credit at one level to the medical system that there aren't. There's a lot of correctional forces in the system to try and avoid having these errors become really significant to the individuals being diagnosed and treated. But the point of this article is to test LLMs against these benchmarks and see if they can actually differentiate enough to make it worthwhile as an evaluation. And they've shown it kind of does. They've shown the results are, it's hard to, you have to do a little more analysis, I think, than they did. But at a first order, the robots do pretty well. The humans do a little better at some things and slightly worse at others. And that is consistent with most of the work we've seen. So in some, I would say optional unless you're really interested in this area or working in this area.
All right, we're headed for an optional unless you're in this area. What do you think, folks? Adam?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
A good framework, however, medical or
Yes.
otherwise, to correct the errors and find them and then correct them. So good framework.
Awesome. All right, optional it is. Next.
Oops. Here.
All right, we have small agents, a library to build great agents that allows you to do very small models. And on this one, we had Adam. What'd you think?
Useful if you're living in that world, probably for developers specifically who are writing in Python and are looking for this. I mean, this is published by Hugging Face, so for that massive community, and it is quite a large community that uses the models from there, this will be a helpful step forward in terms of making it easier to run agents and to build great agents. But I think that's a pretty small niche, frankly, at this point still. Useful to know about. Debatably, it could be something that I could consider important, that if you have people within your organization that are already starting to do this, you could pass it on and make them aware of it. But for the most part, I'd say it's probably optional for our audience.
All right, we're headed for optional here. Tim, you go with that?
I agree. This is, again, reinforcing the idea of the master craftsman. If you're a master craftsman, this is really important. If you're a normal mortal, not so much. Optional.
But I agree with optional, but it's fascinating that we keep seeing that there's library of that and library of that. And so those are improvement tools. So for the experts or people who are programming, this is, more efficient and better, and it's improving every day. So that's fascinating, but optional it is, I think.
Yeah, optional for me as well. I'd say what the evolution of standards is going to be kind of interesting here, especially in an agentic world, because those standards are going to be vital to how far these things go, how quickly. We did a study on standard evolution one time, and it's interesting. It's true that standards tend to follow volume of transactions, not the other way around. So we'll see who gets the flow that can then set the standard or influence the standard. All right, optional this is next. Semicon, world's first open source semiconductor focused LLM. Very interesting. An LLM built on the back of very specifically to semiconductors. So unlike Bloomberg, which seems to, Bloomberg's GPT, which didn't seem to set the world on fire, this one is claiming 30% faster in terms of bringing new chips to market, the amplification of knowledge. So what'd you think here, Tim?
I think this is, again, it's somewhat important, but I probably would still consider it optional for the AI leader because it's focused on semiconductors. There's a general thing here that alliances can bring industries together to create focused models, which we've talked about a lot as probably the future. And this one appears to bear that out, at least on a first order, that, by focusing on semiconductor design, they've achieved some real gains in workflow and productivity. And they did it by getting a bunch of semiconductor companies together and cooperating a little bit. So we'll see if this translates into other areas. It's an announcement. There's not much here. It's just a press release. So it's hard to get too excited about it because these are claims. There's not real data out there yet. And we'll see if it really, to your point about Bloomberg, if it really gets traction amongst the semiconductor designers and the semiconductor industry. So I would say optional.
All right, optional. Luda, Adam, you guys good with that?
Yeah, Optional it is. However, it's yet another step up, right? This is a tool that AMD and IBM and Meta, Microsoft cooperating on. So hopefully this will be adopted, and as a result, will increase the number of various chips out there. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah, the thing that strikes me, no matter what data you look at or any, rigorous research study, just the ability to upskill the bottom end and to create a new floor for, minimum understanding, whether it's at an individual level in a call center or up through something like this, I think is just fantastic. Very much like, to me, it's a format that allows for the transfer of knowledge for the interested. Back to your thing about master craftsman, Tim, your ability to become a master craftsman faster, I think, is here. And also, how it raises the floor in any organization or so forth. And I'm also going to go optional, but I think we're going to see more and more, industry, the base level of being able to compete in industry is going to go up. The good news is it'll be available to lots of companies. The bad news is if you're not doing that, you're going to have a hard time competing. All right, next. All right, here, NVIDIA bets on robotics to drive future growth. Yeah, this basically says, hey, look, if NVIDIA is going to continue to justify its massive market capitalization, it's going to have to find new growth markets. On robotics here, reported in the FT. And I think on this one we had Adam.
Yep. I'm hesitant to give this an important. I'm really feeling like I want to say optional, mostly because the headline pretty much is all you need to read. Yes. The answer is yes. NVIDIA is betting on robotics drive future growth. If you didn't know that, you do now. The article didn't offer, for me at least, much beyond that, other than stating the obvious around what they're doing currently and stating the obvious around what they've already stated quite publicly they're planning to do. So I didn't see much insight here. It is very short, and if someone's like, "Oh, NVIDIA's doing robotics," it's a pretty good read to get up to speed on the current landscape with NVIDIA and where they are and where they're going. But for me, it just didn't have enough to it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
It's optional, but it's also, interestingly, talks about the history of robotics at NVIDIA and how long they have been at it, and the fact that there's still a whole bunch of challenges to conquer before it becomes real. So it kind of gives you a somewhat pessimistic view on whether they will be successful in doing that in the short term. So it's I think an interesting read, but optional.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
I think optional too. It's interesting. From an investor point of view, probably a good bet. Because robotics eventually will take off, I'm sure, much more than they already have. And it's already a pretty big industry. So we'll see. But there's not much to this article.
It's interesting. I'm bullish on the use of robots in controlled spaces in warfare. I'm very bearish on the use of robots in human spaces. I think back to the Segway, which was an unbelievable people mover, and they thought it would be used by a lot of folks. It's you basically lean forward. You can, there's a fantastic, device that we can get to someplace fast, but really didn't take off at all because people just didn't like the interaction. So we'll see what model looks like. I mean, what the social reaction to robots will be, but warfare, it's a no-brainer. I mean, warfare, controlled environments. All right. So today, very late reading day, on hangover day, whatever, day after the new year. We have 2 importance, 4 optionals, and that is about it. We're going to be back here tomorrow. Any announcements or anything from folks? To me, the most interesting thing there, almost essential, is the Cerebras one. I mean, I think the launch of a new computer architecture, is something to keep an eye on when it's at that scale. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Bye-bye now.
Bye.